We tell others to learn from their mistakes, yet we avoid failure at all costs, and very few of us would admit otherwise. So if failure is such a valuable teacher, how do we reconcile avoiding these learning experiences in the first place? A basic mindset shift for any leader is to shift away from thinking of failures as verdicts or judgments. They're data points. But that's easy to say when the consequences are real and there's real people's lives at stake and money at stake. When a project loses money, it feels like a failure, but there's no better example of a concentrated lessons learned situation than a failed project. You get to look at your assumptions to see if they were right, your estimation, your scheduling, your appreciation of time. Or one of your top performers decides to leave the organization. There's no worse feeling than that. But on the other hand, it opens up a space for somebody else to come in. Somebody on the team is thinking, it's my chance to fleet up. So one of the themes here in this video is going to be that nothing meaningful is built without friction. Nothing great comes easy. Hi, I'm Mike Targus, retired Marine, founder of Senate Leadership Coaching. I served 21 years in the Marine Corps, leading Marines, and transitioned in 2013 to project management, engineering, and sales. I've been leading teams on that side ever since. So I've seen both sides, military and civilian. And this channel is about leading the team you have, not the one you wish you had. Let's start out by looking at our leadership framework that we're developing. First big part of the framework is our chaotic environment. This is where uncertainty, friction, and incomplete information dominate your environment. And within this environment, outcomes, our results, are shaped by our understanding, control, and chance. Not just effort or our intentions, which is a lot of times what we think. If we just worked hard enough, things will work out. Not always. And your authority requires you to make decisions a lot of times with extreme amounts of uncertainty. And this video is going to focus on consequences, not as verdicts on our abilities as leaders or as our identity as people, but as feedback on the judgments that we made that caused them. It's important to remember and remind ourselves that leadership unfolds through action. We have to try things to see if they work. You must do things. Leadership shows itself through your actions. And those actions sometimes can produce results that are uncomfortable. The results might be ambiguous. You might not be able to tell if it worked. Almost all the time, the results are visible to other people. And because leaders are held accountable for results, whether or not something works out can feel like a judgment against you as the leader. Or if it does work out, it feels like a win that we're more inclined to take credit for. In other words, whether or not something works out, we tend to judge that as saying something about our competence, rather than just the raw information about how we got to that point. Wins feel like validation, whereas a loss can feel like being condemned or a condemnation. And this is an understandable way to look at it. It's probably the way that most of us look at things throughout the day, but it's not the most productive way to look at things. And aside from our need to achieve results, we are prone to a bias called fundamental attribution error, which is when we overcredit or we overemphasize personal attributes. We underweight situational factors. And a good example of this is, you can think about this when somebody does something at work, say they come into work a little bit late. If you're like me, your first inclination is to think, can't this person just get in on time when we ask? We're not so much inclined to think, gee, I hope everything's okay at home. I hope there's not an emergency. I hope there's not some reason negative that caused this person to come in late to work. So we look at the person as the cause of the failure before we look at the situations that may have caused the situation in the first place. Now contrast this with when something goes right. Say you do something right, or it could be somebody else, but just say it's you. We're more inclined to take credit for that situation than to look at the overall environment and see what was the chain of events that caused the success that I just happen to be part of. So when something works, we're inclined to take credit and downplay the circumstances. It's an interesting one, and I think if you pay attention to it, you're going to pick up on it right away, the fact that you probably err on that side I do it. I think most of us do it, but it interferes with learning. We are less inclined to dive into things when they work because that's just a success to be reflected upon us. We spend more time looking at the failures, maybe. And if you and I were working together, I would ask you, would you say you spend more time reinforcing success or fixing failure? And, you got to think about that for a second. A lot of times we spend more time on things that aren't working right when we should really try to put most of our effort on what is working. When you treat a situation, a negative outcome, as a verdict, then failure, instead of being this learning opportunity, becomes a threat or something to be avoided at all costs. And that's understandable. I don't go after failure, but the difference becomes when we fear failure. We don't try things, we don't innovate. And worse than that, we try to conceal any sort of negative reflection on us, our reputation or identity, at the expense of maybe trying something new for the benefit of the group or the team. But then you could ask yourself, well, isn't even that okay if I try to avoid failure on behalf of the team? It's okay to a certain extent, but what you want to be aware of is if you are trying to save face, your people are going to sense that immediately. They're very sensitive to any sort of selfish act on the part of their leaders. Now, you just can't fool people with stuff like that. And really what you're doing is you're teaching the team to do the same, to manage the optics. And it goes in the opposite direction of transparency or just telling the plain truth. What's really going on? We can handle it. Let's just get it out there. When you do stuff like that, it's the opposite effect. And you lose the ability to learn the best lessons that way. That's a good way to think about transparency is how can we really get at the heart of what's going on a daily basis, exactly to the nitty-gritty details, no matter how it looks. That's transparency, when you can talk about that openly as a group. And this is also the problem with a pure results focus. And this might be something that's on your resume, focused on results. As leaders, we do have to produce results, but you have to keep in mind, while results are important, building the team and teaching the team how to work together and how to not fear failure but learn from it is also part of your job. So treating failure as valuable information requires discipline. You got to get over all those emotional hurdles to get there. The project that loses money, or the project that might be seen as a failure, the gold mine of information on what not to do next time, your estimation, your timeline, your assumptions, your customer interactions. You just can't get that sort of feedback when things go well. In a sense, a failure like that reveals everything. It opens the curtain on everything that is out there, and it concentrates it into one event. So, you don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 years learning all these things, death by 1,000 cuts, if you can take advantage of that point in time. And as you can see, if you think about it like that, when things don't work out, you got to capitalize that and make the best of it. It's not entirely a bad thing because you're learning. And the thing that you want to pay attention to is if you were somebody that was personally involved in the project, in this example, the project that was an overall failure, you got to really get over that and get that behind you so you can confront the reality with your people, get over the ego part. And if you can put that self-defensiveness aside, it's just going to accelerate the learning. And think about it, even when you win, even when the project is a smashing success, it takes a real disciplined team to stop and examine why you won as well. A lot of times when we have a success, we celebrate it, but then we move right on. We don't have to spend time on that. And that gets back to the question, do you reinforce success or do you reinforce failure? You try to reinforce success. And the same applies to the people in your team. When one of your best people decides to leave, there's no worse feeling when you get that information that one of your best people is leaving to go somewhere else. But you got to remind yourself, the people on the rest of the team, it's probably sad to see the person go, but somebody, maybe a couple people on the team, are looking at that as an opportunity for them to move up. You can feel like maybe it's a betrayal. How could this person leave us? But change that line of thinking to, No, this is an opportunity for somebody else who's been waiting to move into that spot. And not only that, but it gives you an opportunity to look at why the person's leaving in the first place. Now, people usually say, oh, I wasn't looking for a job and this just fell in my lap and I love the place here, but it's time for me to go. But what you should try to do is you should try to sit the person down and get them to tell you as bluntly as possible the real reasons they're leaving, if you can handle it. Cultural weaknesses, succession problems, incentives that are misaligned, compensation. These are cultural gold nuggets that you wouldn't otherwise have known about. So look at it that way. That's another opportunity to learn about your organization. That's actually a really concentrated, potent way to do it when somebody leaves. Now, not looking forward to people leaving, but when they do, think about that as an opportunity. Treating events as learning opportunities doesn't mean you're not disappointed. It doesn't mean there's no emotion involved at all. You're going to feel that. People are going to be agitated, nervous, angry. All that stuff is really going to take place. But what matters is the way you respond. And this is a valuable opportunity for you to separate yourself from the pack by showing that you do have feelings. You are feeling the disappointment like everybody else, but you're able to regulate that. And it's important for people to see you being able to regulate those emotions. One of the things that we can do, even when we don't do that, is we're going to overcorrect when there's a setback. If you're not looking at a failure as an opportunity to learn, you're going to tighten the grip. You're going to put additional controls in place. And all of these things are going to affect the people who are watching you do this. You might have a lot of people on the team that had nothing to do with the failure. However, they're going to be impacted by this overcorrection to that. Conversely, if you're the type of leader who has an even-keeled approach, you bring everybody together, you say, talk about what happened. Just by setting the tone in that way, you're going to get better information because people aren't going to sense, you're not looking to blame people. You're looking to get the information out on the table. Now you gotta follow up with that. Now there is such a thing as people making an unexcusable error. It's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about as the team works together and the result is not what we hope for. You have an even-keeled response. And you assure people the objective is to learn to not do it again next time, not to blame. It's possible. You just kind of imagine yourself, you're leading an organization. You could go as far. You could have a team ready to descend down and do a postmortem or analysis on these failures. You could take it that far, which would really demonstrate to the team how seriously you're taking that. And you bring people in to assist the people that are responsible for the day-to-day with taking a look at what went wrong and how to fix it in the future. So in that sense, you, as the leader, you're really setting the tone for the importance of this learning by doing something like that, by committing the resources, by putting people and money where your mouth is, not just looking to blame. Think of what message that sends to the organization when you support an effort like that. And over time, teams learn how to deal with these disappointing situations. How? By watching you. And if you treat setbacks as indictments on people, that people are going to be defensive. They're going to try to cover things up. It's hard to think of it that way, but that is what's going to happen. You're going to start getting the best possible version of the truth. You can have delays in information when it's going to take longer for things to reach you. But if you treat failures as data points, then people are going to calm down. They're going to be reflective. They're going to be looking to participate in that process. And this is where psychological safety emerges. And it's not from being soft and just no matter what happens, telling people it's going to be okay. It's about being predictable and that when something does go wrong, you're going to look into it. We're not blaming anybody, at least not initially. We're going to find out what happened as a team. And it's good to remind ourselves that progress in leading teams is not linear. It's not going to be a straight line from where you are to total success that's just going to keep going. You're going to have zigzags. You're going to have valleys. You're going to have hard times that you're going through. And those hard times could last months or even years. And you have to have that expectation that there's going to be some dips, because if you don't, when they do happen, you're going to be more likely to be thrown off course. You're going to be discouraged. And again, the people in your team are going to see that and they're going to reflect that. So one of your main contributions is stability. So you have to be the one that thinks in terms of not days and weeks, but you got to be thinking months and years of steady progress, holding the team together, getting a little bit better each day, not looking for a new victory every day. Steady progress, good goals, ways that people can see that they're improving and the whole team is improving. And you're leading them right through that on a steady incline. When you hit those valleys, you're still steadfast. You're looking forward to the future, and people can sense that. They feel confident. That's predictability. And in some ways, you are keeping the ship on course so people can catch up, if not physically with things that they're doing, maybe just emotionally, get their head back in the game. And I'm reminded of something our battalion commander told us on our Iraq deployment was, in this case, a counterinsurgency, but patience, persistence, and presence. Those are the three Ps. Those are what you need to do in the long-term leadership of your team. You got to be persistent and constant. People got to know where you come from, and you got to keep coming back to that. What is most important to me? What is most important to the team? And you have to be patient when things don't work out. And you have to be around your people so they can see that you're not losing your mind when things aren't going well. So leadership is not some sort of test that you pass or fail on any particular day. It's a sustained series of events, of actions, where everybody's learning together. And as you're doing that, every setback becomes, like I said, a data point, a valuable piece of feedback to get you adjusted back on course. And that's a good way to define a useful experience, something that helps you get better or compounds in importance, relevance, or impact over time. And you're going to notice an effect on the team too. They're going to be harder to throw off course. They're going to be more resilient because they know they're focused on the long term and they know that you're going to be leading them along that long-term journey. So the small setbacks along the way are tolerable. I wouldn't call this being optimistic. I would call this being disciplined. It's trusting your leaders, trusting each other, staying focused on the long-term goal and pursuing it. And you, as a leader, you obviously have to believe all of this. There's nothing easy about failure, but it's on you to set the example of how you're going to adapt to it and how you want the team to deal with it as well. Action plan time, 5 points. First one is treat your outcomes as data points. You got to separate your emotion and take a look at what really happened. 2, analyze the conditions, not just the people. When somebody does something that looks like it's wrong, don't jump to conclusions on the person. Take a look at the situational factors that surrounded it. Number 3, be aware that your ego is going to complicate learning. It's going to resist you, and it's going to resist your urge, the need for you to be transparent with your team to really get at what happened. You got to get out of the way with your ego. Number 4 is react deliberately. This is your steady leadership. Focus on the long-term growth and improvement of the team, getting through setbacks along the way and assuring people that it's going to be okay. Let's learn from it so we don't do it again. And number 5, always set a good example during tough times. The default environment that you're working in is confusing, limited information, setbacks, problems. That's why you're there. People aren't put in charge of teams because success is inevitable. You're put in charge of a team because you got to ensure success. So look at difficult situations, and this is another thing that's really easy to say. Any difficult situation, take a deep breath. That's a great opportunity for you to show steady leadership to your people and start working on gaining that trust. And that's it. I hope this video made you think a little bit differently about your leadership style. If it did, consider liking and subscribing and following along. And on this channel, we focus on leading the team you have, the people that are coming into work tomorrow for you. Lead the team you have. Till next time, look at failure as a valuable learning opportunity, not just a setback in and of itself. Thanks.